Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Full Pelt Music Podcast. Shortly, we'll be joined by Written by Wolves, who released their new album, The Lighthouse, on July 26th. But before then, the usual reminders from myself. If you would, please do follow Full Pelt on social media. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And again, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, whatever you're watching or listening. Well, welcome to Mikey from Written by Wolves to the Full Pelt Music Podcast. Absolutely delighted to have you on today. First question, simply, how are you doing?
Mate, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It is very, very cool to be a part of this one today. So thank you for having me. I'm very well. I'm in New Zealand. We were just chatting about how it's winter here and pretty much everyone in the country is sick. So that's pretty fun. But apart from that, I'm actually not sick. So I'm kind of, I suppose, exaggerating about everyone there. So maybe only like 99% of the country is sick right now.
Yeah, as we were discussing, pretty similar over in the UK actually, and I'm battling a bit of the lurgy myself. So
Well,
yeah,
you're looking and sounding good, mate. So you're pulling it off. You're doing well. I'm impressed.
oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate you completely for that. Obviously, we were talking about the UK summer and how it's been and gone. We had 3 nice days last week, and that's it. Obviously, you came across the UK end of last year. So I mean, you're just in UK in November. The weather obviously would have been pretty awful. I'd imagine.
Somewhat similar to the summer, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just can't tell the difference over here. But yeah, obviously, for you guys coming over and being able to play a couple of shows in the UK, plus you had even more shows over in Europe as well. How was the experience for you back in November?
We just like the thing. It was kind of like initially it was like a sense of relief that we'd finally made it. So we've been working on making it to the UK for so long, into Europe, of course, and originally we were meant to come in. So our debut album Secrets came out in 2019, and we were meant to tour in 2020. And we all know how the history books show what happened there. So we
Yeah.
kind of, all plans went on hold, and we spent a couple of years just kind of hanging out in our backyards and writing music in our home studios. So look, to finally make it was just incredible. It was pretty terrifying initially as well because obviously this was our first tour. It was a headline tour, so we were coming over. It kind of lives and dies with us, right? Like there's no one that we're relying on to sell the tickets for us. It's all about us, and we'd never been able to see the fan base over there, physically. Like we knew Spotify for artists and things like that, and YouTube and things like that tell us that where the fans are. We know that we've got fans over there, but I don't know whether it's just a Kiwi thing or a musician thing or what it is. But we were kind of sitting there going, is anyone actually going to turn up? In saying that, I think about every single show, so that's no different. But it's pretty scary. But from our first show, I think our first show on that tour was in Milan, in Italy, and right from sound check, there were people queuing up outside, and there was people singing along from song one to song end, and so it was amazing. We kind of had our fears kind of quashed pretty quickly, and then once we got to the UK, it's kind of once again, I don't know whether it's a once again a Kiwi thing, but I've spent quite a bit of time in the UK, and it kind of felt a little bit like coming home, I suppose. Like our London show was absolutely amazing. To be honest, our London show was probably one of our favorite shows we've ever played. Manchester was fantastic. And so we're basically now just really excited to get back. So we're working on it, and hopefully we will be back in your neck of the woods sometime real soon.
Well, that'll be fantastic for fans over here if you can. Particularly as we're going to delve into the fact it's a really exciting time for Written by Wolves at the moment. You've got your second album coming out. As you touched on as well, actually, the fact that that first album came out in 2019. So, as you say, we know what happened in the year or two that followed that, and it obviously would sort of just threw everything out of whack for bands that have these rigid schedules sort of laid out ahead of them, and then everything just went crazy for a while, and you
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
necessarily get you've created Secrets, the debut album, and you expect, well, we're gonna get to go and do this and feel the reaction live from the crowd, and then it doesn't happen. It's not. You're not used to it really as a musician
Yeah.
because you
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, for this time around, though, fingers crossed.
Well, that's
um,
right.
I don't want to ruin it and some other like disaster strikes us. But fingers crossed, the
Oh
world's.
man, surely not. Surely we got a few years reprieve before the world has to shut down again.
Well, you would hope so, but the world is crazy at the moment.
The world is
But
absolutely crazy.
but yeah, obviously, second album is coming out on the 26th of July, called The Lighthouse, and we'll
Mhm.
delve into the album itself in a moment. But we're going to start off with the latest single from the album. So Please Just Breathe, which is just an incredible piece of work. Just musically, obviously the deeply personal sort of themes and lyrics behind it and everything that it clearly means to you and will mean to everyone that listens to it in their own way. And I think that's such an important thing about music. But for you, with Please Just Breathe, I say deeply personal song. The core of Written by Wolves, like musically, and it is just mental health. The theme of mental health just runs through everything that you do. How important was it for you to write that track? Was there a sense of catharsis with it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you say, like that's Please Just Breathe is a very personal song for me. I mean, I've always made it really sort of clear that songwriting is kind of my form of therapy. It's kind of what I use to kind of get out things that I might be struggling with or struggling to talk about. It's the way that I kind of, I suppose, tell these stories and kind of allow myself to kind of grow and kind of heal from the shit that's going on. That one in particular though was kind of so for those that aren't aware, so Please Just Breathe is about the day that my father died, which was a pretty hectic time. So I was on that particular day. My dad had been sick for a while. It wasn't like a kind of well, it was a surprise in the sense that we didn't think it was happening, and we knew he had terminal cancer. It was we knew this day was going to come. It just we didn't think it was coming when it did. And I was actually in a town in New Zealand called Queenstown. And he was in the middle of the North Island in a place called Rotorua, and he was rushed to hospital. And my mom called me really early in the morning and was like, "You got to get here right now." Queenstown to Rotorua is really hard to do. You can't really fly directly there. You've got to fly back to Auckland and then either fly to Rotorua and then or drive. And so the flight from Queenstown to Auckland is 2 hours, and then there was no flights that would get me there in time from Auckland to Rotorua, so I had to drive, and that's 3 hours. So I had a 5 hour trip to get there. We managed to luckily get on the next flight out of Queenstown. So we kind of got this call and we're like on a plane in like an hour type thing. Uh, Flew from Auckland, jumped in the car. Luckily, the car was parked at the airport already, um, and sort of just raced. And so that song is just about that whole experience, um, of how helpless it feels and how trapped you feel, kind of trying to do this thing and just desperately, my whole sort of the whole theme of the song, the whole idea of the song is just kind of desperately kind of imploring him to keep breathing until I got there. Um, so yeah, a pretty heavy kind of tune. And I think I've always never tried to shy away from kind of the sort of tougher topics. I mean, as I say, it is kind of my way of dealing with these things. And it was a song, I suppose, like I suppose I always knew I'd probably write something about it. Um, but obviously, you know, that's kind of where I landed, and that was the idea and the theme of how it was going to go. And the verses like tried to tell the story of how it all worked is kind of as close and sort of with as little metaphor as possible, I suppose, to make it somewhat clear. But I mean, as you touched on, the beauty of music is that, that whilst that's a deeply personal story for me and a really particular story, I mean, I don't always write about very particular moments in times. It's often more sort of broad than that. Um, but still, even though my intention is about a story that happened to me and kind of, but anyone else listening to that song, I feel like there's going to be a lot that they can take from it, and there's a lot. I mean, once I wrote it and obviously wrote, I did want it to be like a real sort of, I wanted it to be a message, I suppose, to people that were struggling. Not necessarily just about someone else, but within themselves. That idea of like kind of almost telling yourself to hold on and to just breathe, when you feel like, you're kind of, that, that things are too hard and that, is it worth carrying on? I suppose that theme and that sort of, that mantra, I suppose, of please just breathe is probably the one that I kind of hoped people might be able to sort of take from as something that they can then use and listen to when they are sort of struggling. As something further from the song being about the day that my dad passed away. I think it is. I really hope that it's something that people can take into their own lives and kind of use as a way to sort of perhaps help buoy themselves when they need it.
Absolutely, I think they can. It's such an incredibly powerful song, and will mean so much to so many people. And obviously, reaction to things is so instantaneous these days with social media and everything like that. And I'm going to ask you in a moment about the music video because I'm obsessed with music videos, and we always talk about music videos on this podcast. But I mean, I could see from the comments from watching the music video again just before jumping on with you and remind myself of it. You can see what it means to people in those comments. There's so many people telling their own stories in there, and it's
Mm.
just a wonderful thing to see, and just it gets people having that conversation.
Yeah,
So I mean, just credit to yourself, on that track, but in everything that the band have been doing, and I say the themes that have run through the first album and the second album, which is a bit of a sequel, sort of continuation of it around
hmm
mental health, such an important conversation, and it's very brave of you to be willing to sort of talk about it as candidly as you do on this podcast about
I think it. As you've just touched on, I think it is really important to to try and start having these conversations. I mean, as I say, like I am. I'm super lucky, and I've always felt super lucky that I have this outlet in songwriting, because I'm not great at kind of talking about these things in the open, as I'm sure my family could attest to very very quickly, and I've tried to be very really clear and really open about that in all of these talks, because like I think it's so important that we do start talking about these things and that we do start to have these discussions. Um, but I think it's really important that I make it really clear that I'm not good at that as well. Like I'm kind of, it's something that I'm working on and is still not great at. But I think if we can kind of give a platform in which people can start, as you say, telling their own stories, and sort of use that as a way to kind of, because sometimes just writing it down is really really helpful. And look, it's not gonna be for everyone, and it's not gonna work for everyone. But I think that's the kind of conversation that we need to have. Is that this is something that these issues is something that everyone faces. It can be so uh often feel like whenever you're dealing with these mental health issues or these struggles that you're the only that you're so alone and that you're the only person sort of dealing with it. So I feel like there's a sense of comfort that comes from knowing that it is a really normal thing and that these things are really normal. And so, um, if people can see that, there's, that, we can all talk about this and we can start writing and we can, you find this like sort of level of support, in these kind of, in these comment sections, I suppose, when you do sort of have these stories, because people go, well, I can relate to that and I've seen that and that's happened to me and I've had this and this is my story and I want to get it out. And I think that's great. Um, I think, it's really important that we do have these platforms and these opportunities to have these discussions, and I suppose change the kind of way that we look at this stuff and the stigma around it. And I know it's not easy. Like I'm not saying, we need to just go boom and start kind of talking about all this stuff now, because as I say, I'll be the first to admit that I'm still absolutely rubbish at it. But it's a I suppose something that we just as a society need to, and I think we are, like I really do believe that it is changing. Just the fact that you and I are sitting here on a podcast having a conversation about this right now suggests that the entire focus has shifted in the way that we discuss this. It wouldn't have happened a few years ago. I certainly wouldn't have. I probably wouldn't have even have told you what the song was about.
Yeah.
So that's kind of these are new things, and it's great, and I think if we can be a part of being that platform, or giving that opportunity to other people, then we're that's something I'm incredibly proud of.
As you should be, and yeah, it's so important to get that conversation going. And I agree completely. Yeah, 5, 10 years ago, you couldn't have the same types of conversations, which I certainly couldn't, as you say. I mean,
Mhm.
I've got a lot better at I think uh, talking to other people about their issues, perhaps, and being able to support them a lot better than I would have done in the past. And
Mhm.
obviously, but it's just harder, to be honest, for me to open up about myself still. It's still a really difficult thing to do. I'm getting better at it, and these conversations
Mhm.
definitely
Mhm.
help.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
say definitely credit to yourself for what you do. And speaking of, how powerful music can be, I gave a hint at where we're going. The music video. I absolutely love music videos. Obsessed with music videos since a young age. Music TV before and after school, watching music videos. Um, Such a dying art. Not a lot of attention goes into them these days. But I was really taken aback by just how beautiful the video is for Please Just Breathe. Such an incredible piece of work that fits obviously the song so well. And just wanted to get your obviously a bit of a story really behind how that video came about for you.
Yeah, I mean, it, as you say, like the world's kind of moving away, or not necessarily moving away. It's just harder and harder to make these amazing music videos, and that's always been a part of this band. So it's not really something we're going to stop because it's we feel it's really important. We know that there's a really, the band's always had this really intense kind of cinematic side in the music. So we like to be able to use the videos to kind of bring that out and kind of allow that kind of to tell the story further or be another piece of the puzzle of how we tell these stories. And I think on this particular project, on not just this song, but this entire project, so the Lighthouse in general, we've made it really, we found it really important to ensure that the visual kind of tells the story as well, because there's a pretty intense story going through it. But with Please Just Breathe, we basically went to all the directors that we worked with at the start of the project when the album was ready, and we've got this just such an incredible group of beautifully talented people that do these amazing things. So we've got Taylor and Matt at Below in New Zealand. So they're the only one that we work with. So the only one on this project that we've worked with that's actually based in New Zealand. And then we've got a guy called Nick Kazakis and his team in Melbourne with Visible Studios. And so they've done Altar and Goddess, and they're actually working on one more just as a little cheeky aside. And then we've got this incredible guy in LA called Josh Maybe. Now, years and years ago, well, I say years and years ago, which I suppose it is now, but that sounds like I'm sort of talking about like hundreds of years ago. But when we first started out, Josh sent us a message on YouTube and said, "Look, I love your music. I'd love to work with you." He could have been absolutely anyone, and I kind of was like, "Yeah, man, let's have a chat. Let's jump on a call." And we jumped on a call and just like immediately vibed, and like we just sort of, there was this kind of kindred sort of something that we just got on amazingly well. And I went, "You know what? I'm just going to send you a whole heap of unreleased tracks, and I think you just pick one and just go wild on it, and it won't be." And he ended up picking the song To Tell You the Truth. And so that was never really slated as a single. That wasn't something we'd ever planned on really making a music video for or anything like that. It's like it's a 5 minute song with a or like a minute and a half instrumental intro, sorry. So we were like, that's not one that's not within the kind of single release mode, I suppose. um but we were like, yeah, doc, there's no timeline on it, just do what you want and go wild. And he went nuts, and kind of, it turns out that it was, it's our most viewed video, and one of our, most popular tracks. So if it wasn't for him, we probably, he was a huge part of building the success of the band, and a huge part of, we as I say, we were never going to drop that track as a single. And then all of a sudden, he kind of saw something in it that he was like, I want to do this, and people vibed in it and connected with it. And so he's like a brother to us. He's certainly part of the family. And we finally got over to LA when we were recording this album a couple of years ago, and finally actually got to meet him in person, which we hadn't, we'd worked with him, and then COVID hit and all this stuff. So we'd never actually got over to sort of to physically hug him and have a drink with him. And so he was there right at the start of this album, and I sat in my hotel room in LA and played some tracks down with him and said, right, I want, here's the first taste. Now I need you to start sort of thinking about which ones what you want to do and what you want to vibe on. And he kind of gravitated towards this one. And I said, look, all right, well, I'm going to sit you down and tell you the story. And I got home from LA and we got on a call and he was like, and I sent them to him. I was like, I want it to I want you to sit with it for a while, sit with all the tracks for a while and see which one you're vibing on. And as we did with all the directors that I've just kind of explained, they all got sent the album. I said, look, most of these are going to go as singles. This is how we're doing this album drop. So basically pick what you're into and vibe on it and just, and just smash it up. And so from there, I got on a call with Josh when I got back to New Zealand. I was like, right, this is the story. This is what the song's about. And he was like, okay, I got it. Let's do this. And so he basically came back with this story where it's like, I want to tell the story and I want to do it in, in as intense way as possible. And so he came up with the idea of the father and the son and trying to have more time, essentially, the idea of making the most of the time you've got but not really understanding that in the moment, and then sort of seeing that play out and realizing that no matter what happens you can't actually change these things. You just have to kind of make peace with them and kind of use that to kind of make influence your decisions in other ways, I suppose. And so, yeah, I mean, he's just such a, as I say, he's part of the family. He's like a brother to me. And he just kind of, I've only got to hang out with him in real life once, but we kind of have this kind of epic kind of connection where it just kind of, we send him something and he knows how to, he knows how to put it on a screen. As do all the incredible people that we work with. So we're very, very lucky and sort of to have a team like that. But we've got people that can kind of take these stories that we tell and tell them in a different way and take them to an even further place, which is pretty amazing.
It really is, and obviously, I absolutely adore your passion for it. And I say music videos are just a love of mine. So there will be a link in the bio, and listeners obviously go and check out not just the video for Please Just Breathe, but all of these videos that have just been talked about. Well worth your time doing so. And yeah, obviously the album then, as we say, the Lighthouse, 26th of July is coming out, so not long
Mm.
now. I've had a sneak peek of it. Incredible
Very nice.
album, incredible album. That again, listeners, you can pre-order it now, and it's well worth doing so for sure. So, first question on the album itself is as is a sequel really or a follow-on, direct follow-on from Secrets. Just the overarching theme though, this one of that lighthouse. Can you just explain what that concept
Yeah,
is? Yeah.
totally. So yeah, I mean, as you've hit, this is a concept album as well. So Secrets was also in this is so Secrets was about kind of trying to talk about the things that we're not comfortable talking about. So that was the overarching theme of that, and trying to sort of, I suppose, start this kind of idea and build this platform of talking about things that we weren't comfortable talking about. But so with this one, with the Lighthouse, we've kind of gone to, taken that further and gone to the next step of kind of what is the idea of home, that we really kind of play on this idea of home and sort of what that is for you. Like it's so home essentially is, as far as this album's concerned, isn't necessarily a physical place, but the place or the or thing or feeling or state of mind or whatever it is that makes you feel safe and happy and good and comfortable. And so when we're in these dark places and we're when we're you know where Secrets was about talking about those, this is about what do you do when you're in these dark places to get you back home. And so that's where the idea of the lighthouse came from. The lighthouse is, what is the thing or the people or the idea or what is it that kind of that you use to bring you back to this kind of this state of home, I suppose. I suppose we all sort of, there's the idea that we're all sort of lost in at times, and what is it that you do when to get back. How is it that you kind of get out of the dark place and sort of get back to this concept of home. And so the entire sort of album is really about that kind of journey, I suppose, and you know touches on the darkness and the bad stuff, and kind of then looks at what it is that kind of we do or brings us back to a place that's far nicer than the shit ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea of the lighthouse. And like you say, it could be a place, but could be a person or people, could be, an activity, a hobby, something that just centers you
Absolutely.
and you can lose yourself, forget all of the crap that's going on in the world and
Uh-huh.
in your life and just like brings you back to like home, as you say. Yeah, really, really good. And I say the album is just incredible. Listeners really need to check it out. What was it like for you to make? Obviously, you touched on you went over to LA. You worked with Gladius James. He's worked with some huge sort of artists. It's a big opportunity, and just getting out to LA to write an album and record an album must have been like an amazing experience. So what was the whole recording process like for you?
Uh yeah, it's been amazing. Like this one, I suppose this album's been about 2 years of my life, which is pretty hectic. So it feels pretty amazing to be actually getting it out in the world. Um, Dave and I started the writing process for this one far too long, what feels like a long, long time ago. And we were sort of we were pretty solid on where the album was sitting before we got out to LA. Now, so Gladius James, as you touched on, has worked with kind of everyone from like Justin Bieber to Demi Lovato, and then the list kind of just goes on from there. But funnily enough, and the reason that we found it, we had a very lucky sort of way to get in the room. He's actually Dave's brother, in the band. So we had it in. It's kind of Christmas dinner would have been awkward if he'd said no. But no, we love working with Gladius. He's a beautiful human. And also, I mean, as I say, like this band's always been about doing different stuff. That it's always been about pushing our sound to as different a place or as weird a place as we can possibly take it. And I think the pop element of our band has always been a big side. It's always been about bringing as many genres together as we can, and starting at a kind of rock and heavy rock kind of place, and then bringing in elements of electronic music or pop music or hip hop or whatever it is that we can kind of try and smash in together to make this sound. And I think working with him was just a great way to elevate that. Where he's been a long, obviously he's Dave's brother. I've known him since he was a kid. So we got to kind of we've got a nice vibe when we're in a room together. It's fun. It was funny, and we got to write some really cool stuff, and kind of take some of these songs to places that we've always got this rule in the studio that if we don't feel uncomfortable with it, we're not probably quite there yet. Like it's got to kind of make you feel uncomfortable and like you're doing things that you should probably second guess, which is kind of a tough way to do stuff. It's like you're kind of living in a constant state of anxiety about whether the decision you're making is right. But we've kind of learned to lean into that and kind of not feel safe about what it is that we're trying to create, so that we can do something that we feel has kind of pushed us musically. But yeah, so it was an incredible process, and I love LA. I've spent a lot of time there as well, and so it was kind of nice, especially in a post-COVID world. I think what I say, so 2 years ago. So yeah, we must have been out there in 2022. Um, so to kind of be, I hadn't gone overseas in so long. We hadn't done anything. So kind of so it felt like such a treat to be able to like head to LA and finish up an album at that time as well. I mean, I know, things are different now, but if I think back to that sort of time, it felt so it was so amazing that we were leaving the country, and there was so many crazy things that we had to do it, and different forms we had to fill out and things that we had to do that have kind of we've since managed to consign to history books now. But yeah, it was amazing. It was a great process, and we kind of came out going, okay, we've got something really, really special here, and I just can't wait for everyone to hear the full project.
Yeah, no, I bet it must be, yeah, obviously exciting yet frustrating the wait before you get that sort of feedback again and get to see the reaction of people. You've created this great album, and you got to kind of sit and wait for a little while, haven't you? But yeah, obviously, it is such. I keep repeating myself, but it's a great album. It's really, I'm glad you sort of touched on the sort of ambition within the sound of the record because it's such an expansive record. And I was, interested to sort of push on that a little bit and just see whether that was a sort of deliberate sort of ambition of the band just to sort of see where you can take your sound. And clearly, I think the answer to that is yes.
Absolutely. And I think, we kind of, we don't really ever want to do something that we've done before. Like, I mean, I think in saying that, we also, we feel like if you hear a Wolf song, you kind of know that it's us. And I think I kind of always feel like that's kind of important as well. But I feel like we're kind of, I mean, I suppose we're just trying to keep ourselves as interested as possible in it as well. And I think if we're going to places that are new for us, that can only be good for the listener. Because if we're keeping ourselves interested and excited, then the fans are surely gonna, they're gonna get a new experience every time. And I know, there's a bit of there's some contention out there about kind of reinventing yourselves because, fans kind of, love you for a reason. But I feel like if we can keep everyone else intrigued and interested and sort of thinking where are we going next and what's going to happen next, and that can only be a good thing. But yeah, this one was definitely about trying to keep ourselves pushed and kind of trying to do things that were different and lyrically and musically and melody wise. I'm just we just tried in every way, shape, or form to kind of find things that we hadn't done yet. And I think there's still lots of places that we haven't gone yet, and there's still a lot of places that we will go. Looking forward to the kind of to the next one, which is funnily enough, we've not got that something that we're already starting to do, which feels daunting but exciting in the same time. And that's kind of, I suppose that's one of the things about music is like you finally get something out, but you're already kind of moved on to the next part. But I think for a little while, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop sort of thinking about what's next and really drink in the fact that we've got this one out because, as I say, it's been 2 years of my life, and I just kind of am really looking forward to sort of it being yours now and not mine, which is very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, great attitude to have, and yeah, you're not alone in the amount of artists that are on this podcast and talk about that same sort of sense of by the time something's coming out, you've already kind of moved on to something else. But I love the attitude or the idea of pressing pause on that and just savoring the moment of release
Yeah.
of birth, out into the
Yeah.
world of this album. So yeah, no, absolutely fantastic. And obviously, once you have the album out there, normally, live shows do follow. You touched on earlier, an ambition or a hope to come back to the UK. The one show that we can plug on the podcast today is obviously you've got a release show coming up with Capital Theatre over in Auckland at Power Station on the 2nd of August. A sort of dual release show for the band. So you must obviously be really excited for that one.
We're hugely excited. So, for those that over the other side of the world, the Power Station is a very important venue in Auckland. It's a very famous venue. It's probably one of my favorite venues in the country. But it's a lot bigger than what we've kind of ever sort of put on ourselves. So it's a big deal. And the band Capital Theatre are really good friends of mine. The singer of that band was actually in one of my last bands, Five Star Fallout. So we've been very, very close friends for a long time. So it's really exciting. They came and said, "Look, hey, we want to do an album release show," and we're like, "Well, our album actually comes out at the same time." And they're like, "Should we do it together?" And so that's seemed like as good a reason as ever to have a party with your mates and hopefully bring 1,000 of our closest friends with us.
No, it sounds just perfect, really, doesn't it? It's going to be a special night for sure. So, anyone listening over on that side, your side of the world, other side to me, definitely,
Or, you guys can just all pop over. Like
yeah.
it's only like 30 odd hours of travel. Just come
Well,
on. Come on
yeah.
over. Jump on a plane. Tickets aren't that it's not even expensive these days. It is. It's incredibly expensive. But I'd be very, you're all welcome.
I mean, that will be a hell of an experience to fly out and see that show, I'm sure. So, listeners, if you can, do definitely get to that show. And it's great to know that obviously there's plans, hopefully, for UK EU tour as well, potentially in the future. And
We're
best
working on it.
place.
It's more than plans. We're
Ooh.
working on it. It's coming. Yeah. So it'll happen. I just can't tell you when because I don't know. But yeah, we're working on it and we can't wait to be back.
Yeah, well, we can't wait to welcome you. And obviously, for fans in the UK, best way to see those dates when they're announced, obviously, is to follow the band on social media. I always give out the social media handles. I'd like to think in 2024 people would find you without my help, but it's a bit of a tradition now. So you make my life really easy because it's literally written by wolves across all of the
Yeah,
social. Yeah,
we're luckily enough we're kind of somewhat the name is there's no names that are similar enough to kind of we got all those ones quite easily. So we're pretty easy to find. If you type in written by wolves on pretty much any platform, we're going to come up pretty quickly.
yeah, no, job well done, definitely. Because sometimes I have to read out 3 or 4 different handles with underscores and all sorts of things in there. So
It's tricky, right?
exactly, no, you made my life easy there. And obviously, yeah, so much going on that listeners need to check out. I say the album in particular when it comes out on the 26th, listeners really need to check out. The final sort of question portion of the podcast is the same every single week every time we have the podcast. It's called Magic Wand. We're going to go into fantasy land a little bit. So
We
on this
like some good
podcast,
bit of fantasy.
exactly. Unfortunately, it's fantasy because I wish it, this magic wand was real sometimes. Because over the course of the 50+ episodes of this podcast and the 60+ of our sister podcasts, we've often ended up talking about issues within the music industry. So I've kind of shoehorned that section into the last little bit, and basically I'm going to give you a magic wand, Mikey. And with that magic
Amazing.
wand, you can change one thing about the music industry, but one thing only. There's obviously quite a lot, yeah, so it's quite a hard one. But today, with your magic wand, what would you change if you could?
Okay. All right. There's lots of things that I would like to change. Clearly. Uh, it's expensive, it's hard, it can be soul destroying. As a musician, you often spend, most of your life, writing these things that are incredibly personal stories only to have, people tell you why they don't like them. And then and unfortunately the human condition is such that I could have 100 comments and 99 of them might be positive, but yet for some reason I remember the one that's bad. I'm just listing some bad things here. This isn't what I'm fixing. um there's still intense levels of discrimination. It's harder to it's harder for various sort of communities to to be heard, but it is hard to be heard, full stop. um you could write one of the greatest albums of all time, but without the right sort of promotion and things like that, um, you still, there's so many musicians out there that, don't have an audience that should. I've seen some absolutely incredible musicians in, very, very recently. In fact, I think that have had some good exposure and had some good breaks, but yet still like the numbers aren't hitting. We're kind of somewhat slaves to algorithms that sometimes work for us and sometimes work against us. You've still got, you know, you've still got people within radio stations that, will decide that they don't like you and just never play you. You've still got all of that stuff. But I think, you know what, for me, which is this seems ridiculous, and I'm going to sound like such an old man. Um, but you know, so something that I change right now, and this is only because I think about it constantly because we're just about to release an album. I I love making music videos. I love making cinematic music videos. I love writing tunes. I love, like, writing this big anthemic tune and then whacking this, incredible cinematic music video behind it. Um but then I have to go and like make um uh sort of TikTok videos, about, and don't get me wrong, I think TikTok's great. but as I say, I sound like an old man because the music industry changes constantly, and the way that you promote things changes constantly. And I'm sick of making really big budget, amazing music videos that I watch and go, wow, and then going, okay, now I've got to sit in my studio and make a far less, because that's how it's going to reach the population. I'm not saying that I need to get rid of TikTok. I'm not saying that I need to get rid of that stuff. I just wish I didn't have to do it.
No, I love it, and I can relate completely to that one as well, actually. So yeah, no, yeah, definitely a great one to put forward, I think. So no,
I
thank
mean,
you.
obviously, I'd like to change all of the other stuff,
Of
particularly like
course.
discrimination and like big sort of radio bosses and things like that decide they don't like someone like that and never play them again. But I suppose right now I don't want to make TikTok videos.
No, I do. I love it. Yeah, and so I relate completely to that. Absolutely do. It's been a great chat, Mikey. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Obviously, so much going on with the band. Listeners really do need to check out everything we've talked about. But I always give the final message over to the guests. So, what would be your final message for the listeners today?
I suppose, like, thank you so much for all the support that we're receiving so far and have received in the past, and I suppose for the way in which everyone is connecting with the tracks that have from the Lighthouse that have been released so far. I just can't wait for every single one of you to sort of get this album in its entirety, and I suppose see the full picture. I suppose we've given you a lot of the picture so far in different ways. And so I suppose now you're going to get to see this project in its entirety and the message, the story that we're trying to tell. And I hope I hope you enjoy it. I hope it means as much to you as it does to me, in whatever way, shape, or form. And look after yourselves, look after each other, and kind of, you know, try find your lighthouse, I suppose.
Beautiful final message, and yeah, couldn't put it any better myself for sure. Thank you so much, Mikey, for coming on the podcast today.
Hey, thank you for having me, mate. I've loved it.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with Written by Wolves. Do make sure you check out their new album, The Lighthouse, which is out on July 26th. And of course, follow the band across social media to stay up to date with everything coming from them. You can also stay up to date with Full Pelt. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And finally, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening, because we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Full Pelt Music Podcast.